Welcome back to our Spec House series. In this episode, you're going to watch a lot of drywall go up. About 13,000 square feet of it, in fact. We've got Darren Sutton and his helper Jack on the job, and if you watch this video and the next one, you're going to know a lot about their trade, and you'll start to finally see the rooms of this house begin to take shape. Drywall is sort of thought of as more or less the halfway point in building a house. And let me tell you, we are happy to reach this milestone and have you along with us. The first thing I want to mention and point out is that all of the measuring and fitting that's done when you're installing drywall is done to the eighth of an inch. In fact, when these guys are communicating measurements back and forth to each other, they will only refer to inches and eighths of an inch. For example, 20 and 4 would mean 20 and a half inches. 18 and 3 would mean 18 and 3/8 inches. 112 and 6 would be 112 and 3/4 of an inch, etc. Bottom line, since every single cut is going to have sheetrock mud troweled into it in one way or another, an eighth of an inch is plenty close enough and way easier to keep track of. If you watched our episode about insulation, you'll remember that this stuff in the ceiling is not stapled or fastened in place in any way. It's simply wedged in between the ceiling joists, and friction is fighting with gravity. Well, as you can see, over time it begins to sag, and if enough time went by, it would end up having fallen right out of the ceiling onto the floor. So Darren and Jack are pushing and lifting the insulation back into place, pushing it up before they put the drywall where it goes. It's a problem for those guys, but I've got to say, right here and right now, that Darren's attitude about complications like this was uniformly positive. He always just put his head down and kicked out great work. The paper on the front and back of the sheetrock is important for several reasons, and it's a different paper on the face than it is on the back. On the back, it's a lot thicker, and so it's a lot stronger. The front paper is very smooth, very even, and takes primer very readily. Now, structurally, the paper is acting sort of like rebar acts in a concrete slab. It's providing tensile strength. The drywall itself, the rock itself, the white stuff is providing the compressive strength. That's why when you're cutting this, you simply score the paper on the face and flex the sheet at the line. Snap! Just like a saw cutting a control joint in a garage floor. Now, some sheetrock will come with a mold inhibitor in the paper, some comes with a glue that activates with water. Whatever kind of sheetrock you're installing, you've got to be sure to keep it dry, because there's not much that's more frustrating than cutting and fitting and hanging soggy sheetrock. You see this nifty little cordless router that Darren is using to make all these detailed cuts? However hesitant I might be to switch over to a cordless skill saw, I'm all in on this little beauty. It's doing for Darren what in most cases is unthinkable in handwork. That is, it's increasing speed and accuracy at the same time. This is as clear a case of cordless beating corded as I've ever seen. A cordless screw gun, router, and utility knife is a great 21st century combination. So I can remember when drywall screws first started showing up on the jobs. They were an immediate game changer for several reasons. First, they held so much better than nails. They would pull the sheet right back, right up against the framing without the same tendency of fracturing the sheetrock with the hammer blows. And second, they set up a situation where the sheets could be tacked into place with nails by the experienced guys, and then later all the screws could be put in by the newbies, because the screw guns would set the depth of the countersink, and so the screws would stop at exactly the right point, and so even a beginner could do a good job with just a little practice. The fact is that a screw is a better connection with far fewer problems later on than nails. But those first few nails will always be important to get those sheets in place when time counts. In some areas and on some jobs, the building code requirements for different length of fasteners for different thicknesses of sheetrock are strictly enforced, as well as the nailing pattern or the screwing pattern for those fasteners. So be sure to check your local codes before you wade into your project. In general, around here, the fasteners are 1.25 inches long for the 1/2-inch drywall and 1.5 inches long for the 5/8, with nails on 7 or 8-inch centers in a single nailing pattern and screws on 12-inch centers, single nailed. The first thing is to hang and nail off the ceilings, and then butt the walls snugly up to it. Not super tight, but, in contact. As you can see, being able to work together with your partner and anticipate what's about to happen next is critically important, because just like every other phase of construction, hanging drywall is all about handling the material efficiently. Now, it's really easy to make more work for the tapers by being sloppy when you're hanging the drywall, because it takes extra time to mud in big gaps, right? But it also is easy to make more work for yourself by trying to make your cuts too tight, because about as many times as not, you've got to take it back down and cut it twice. Darren is one of very few drywallers around here who both hang the rock and tape it, and frankly, he's doing a beautiful job. A good rule of thumb is that 1/8 of an inch of slack in your cuts is just right, and anything over 1/4 is just plain too much. So this is green board or water board, and it's a good idea to put it in any part of your house that might be, damp, high humidity. It is not waterproof. Don't make the mistake of thinking that this is waterproof, but it is mold resistant. The paper on this product is less prone to promote mold growth than on ordinary drywall. But here's the bottom line. Water's a problem. If you have water loose in your house, you've got much bigger problems than any piece of drywall is going to save you from. So don't think of this as being waterproof. So I've already explained that in residential work, 5/8 rock is standard on ceilings, right? Well, 5/8 Type X drywall is also required on any 1-hour firewall, which is always the wall between the house and the garage, and sometimes includes the walls and ceilings under stairways. Usually a firewall must be nailed 7 inches on center to studs that are 16 inches on center, with all the edges, penetrations, and joints taped and mudded. You might be interested to know that there is another fire-rated drywall. It's Type C, and it's more fire-safe than Type X. There are a lot of ways that these fire-rated products can be applied to achieve different levels of fire resistance in your structures, and it's always a good idea to talk to an engineer or your local building official about what they think you ought to do if you have a question about fire safety in any part of what you're building. Usually the idea is to always hang the biggest sheet possible, thereby reducing the number of joints and butts that have to be taped. But on the other hand, you don't want to waste material, which means using scraps when it makes sense. This is always kind of a trade-off between saving the money by using what would have been a scrap or spending the money on a bigger piece of drywall to save the time it would take for the extra tape and texture. And as a bonus, if you do this, it can make a flatter wall for the finished carpenter to fit to. On the back end of this job now, after hauling a lot of rock to the dump and seeing the finished job, I'm of the opinion that Darren got this trade-off exactly right. As you can see now, This really is the very last chance you have to correct anything inside these walls before they're covered up with drywall. So if you haven't done it already, maybe bring your kitchen cabinet specialist through, or maybe a home automation person, heck, maybe even your tile setter, so they know what they're working with and can let you know what they're going to wish you had taken care of before the drywall went up. The need for a smooth, sanitary interior surface on the walls of our houses has been a reality to be dealt with by builders for a long, long time. In many parts of the world, various plasters have been used since antiquity to make this happen. The house that I live in today was built in 1924 and has lath and horsehair plaster on the original walls and ceilings. It was an incredibly labor-intense process by today's standards, and it is absolutely miserable to deal with in any sort of a repair or remodeling project. As it turns out, drywall was invented in 1916 by the U.S. Gypsum Company, but it took decades to catch on as a quality building material. It was thought of as being cheap or shoddy, because after all, how could a product that was 10 times faster be anywhere near as good, right? In fact, it wasn't until after World War II that it really began to dominate the construction industry. And by about 1960 or so, give or take, drywall was king. I hope that you've enjoyed watching Darren and Jack put this stuff up. And in the upcoming episodes, you'll get to see them do the next steps in the drywall process. Processes that are more art than science. And they're known as tape and texture. The next video in our series is going to show the part of the process that is referred to as tape and texture. And it's radically different than hanging, and completely dependent as far as how long it takes and how hard it is to make it look good on the job that the hangers did. Thankfully, the hangers did a perfect job. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.